So how often every day do you hear of someone that's been in an automobile accident? Well, hopefully it's not you, but if the time ever comes, what do you need to do besides calling law enforcement to get there as quickly as possible to file a report? When do you get a lawyer involved in this? Well, we brought in Matthew Mestayer from Reeves Mestayer. How are you? Good to see you.
Good morning.
Well, it's good to see you here during the daytime whenever you're not here on Saturday nights doing law call with you and Jim Reeves.
But it is nice to see the station during the day. It's nice. That's true.
Let's talk a little bit about it. I mean, automobile accidents. There's so many things that people need to be aware of. And I was just reading some of the stuff that was on your website, which you can get a lot of information on regarding accidents.
Sure.
But when is it necessary possibly for an attorney to get involved with an accident?
Well, Jim, really, I have to say you should consult with an attorney, a qualified attorney that does this kind of work as soon as you can, because there's a lot of decisions have to be made right away. You're absolutely right. I know you do some law enforcement as well, as I have a law enforcement background, but absolutely on every accident you should definitely call law enforcement, make sure the police come do a report. But after that, then the case really kind of turns over to you. You have to notify your insurance carrier, but then very soon, kind of those things kind of begin to kind of move forward. For example, you'll be contacted if the other side has insurance. You'll be contacted very quickly. They'll want to take a recorded statement. There's an issue about whether or not you should do that. You're not required to necessarily. Is it a good idea to give a recorded statement? I think every time you're dealing with the other insurance company, you have to assume that they're recording that. So there are a lot of decisions like that. There's photographs. Sometimes there's questions. A lot of times, and you see it all the time too, is you're at the scene, you're in the wreck, you know what happened, but afterward, perhaps the other party who's at fault begins to blame you or tries to blame you for the accident. And so then you're like, wait a minute, well, what's happened? So, preserving the evidence, things like that. So quite frankly, we get calls all the time for people that are in car wrecks, and sometimes we just give them just free advice of the phone and send them on their way. You don't have to have necessarily a lawyer every time, but you should contact a lawyer every time just to make sure, hey, am I doing this right? Am I not doing this right? And for example, and some of our folks, we send away, with advice and say, call us back if you have any questions. We're not charging anything, or come on in and we'll look at paperwork, all free. But then for a lot of people, they need us because there are a lot of important decisions very early on in the case that can affect the case later on, for sure.
Now, one of the things, major things too, being insurance, whether a motorist has insurance. And something you and I were talking about earlier about the number of people that have or don't have insurance, because that's one of the first things whenever an officer pulls up to, whether it's a traffic violation or whatever, can I see your driver's license?
Sure.
Proof of insurance.
Right.
And I hate to say it, a lot of people in Mississippi don't have insurance.
Oh, right. First of all, it's the law. You're required to have it, but as a city judge for as long as I was, as we see it every week. So literally there are hundreds and hundreds of folks on the roadways without insurance. Now that's relatively irresponsible, and unfortunately, it's some of those same kind of people that usually get into car wrecks, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times you'll find yourself, I'm sure most of the people that watch this show are good, people going about their business, and they're responsible and they pay attention on the roadways, and hopefully they're not in wrecks. And so, but if you are in a wreck, a lot of times it's someone with no insurance or low insurance. And then where does that leave you? You're left to kind of pick up the pieces.
So it's really, not to push insurance, so to speak, but it's probably a good thing to invest a little bit more and get uninsured motorist insurance,
Absolutely.
Which is something I have.
Right. It protects you.
Yes.
Okay. And listen, I'm obviously no fan of the insurance companies. I mean, that's clear. But it protects you. I mean, that's the thing. And if you're in any kind of wreck, you'll need all the coverage you can get. And it's cheap, relatively speaking. And as I say, it's good coverage to get because, you can't control what other people do to you a lot of times, right? You're on the roadway. Sometimes you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you're in a wreck. And that person may have low or no insurance. But if you have good coverage, you'll have plenty of coverage to protect yourself.
Talk about gap and medical care. That's one of the major things you want to talk about today.
Right, and that's another reason you kind of need to consult a qualified personal injury attorney, is that we're seeing a lot of times now, listen, most people are stoic, don't like going to the doctor if they can avoid it, honestly. They hope they get better if they're in a car accident, they have some aches and pains, and they don't go regularly to the doctor. They want to get back to their lives. They don't want to hopefully have to deal with an injury. And sometimes folks will go months without going back to a doctor. They'll just hopefully it gets better. Hopefully they'll get over it. But it doesn't, and they go back to the doctor, and months have gone by, and the insurance companies, they call that a gap in medical care or a gap in care, and a lot of times they'll try not to accept that as part of the claim. because you were tough, because you were stoic and not trying to run up medical bills.
Or who's to say something else could have caused that injury?
Well, absolutely. So they throw it in your face and they say, no, we're not going to cover it. So, and do I think that's fair? Of course I don't think it's fair. But you've got to be mindful of that, and you have to kind of manage that, because you do not get rewarded for being strong, for being stoic, for not going to the doctor. You've got to take care of yourself, and so you have to be mindful of those things. So the fact is, there's just a lot of forces at foot when you're in a car accident, many of them not on your side, and you need someone on your side at least to give you, at least as a guide, to work you through the process so you're fully protected.
Now, I was reading some of the different things on here as far as driver negligence is one of the biggest things that cause accidents, and distracted driving, including texting. Man. Top of the list. I mean, DUI is not even on here because usually you don't. People who are texting and driving, for the most part, causing more accidents than anything else.
Oh, sure.
And then you got to prove it.
Yeah, as we talked about, I mean, not everyone on the roadway, thank goodness, has a drink, but pretty much everyone has a cell phone now, and people are texting, they're taking phone calls, and even reading the news. I was telling you off air recently, I was going down the highway. I've got a truck which is a little high, so I can, I glanced over, and there was a lady, reading her phone as she was going down the highway. I think she was watching the news, for heaven's sakes. And so, that's scary stuff, and you see that all the time. So that, if anything, it seems like accidents are on the rise. They're not getting better, it's getting worse, I'm sorry to say. And I think cell phones have a major part in that.
And, other things that could be involved with accidents, and again, this is something that y'all look at, defective vehicles, and then, all the way up until, involving trucks. You see a lot of those truck companies here lately. The list of things, weigh station personnel, truck parts or equipment manufacturer, and these are all things that you get in reports and find out.
Downloads, yeah, there's just a lot of things that kind of go on with these kind of cases, and a lot of it happens in the context of being at work. A lot of folks get in accidents while they're doing some deliveries for work, or they're on the job, kind of going from one kind of job site to another, and so there's a workers' comp component sometimes to car wreck cases. Of course, trucking cases, those are very complicated. Normally the results are very tragic when big trucks are involved. Yeah. The injuries are horrific. We've seen that, we see that a lot, unfortunately, recently, and so those get complicated. We have people that'll go immediately on the scene and do what's called downloads. They'll take the computer information off the trucks and get speed and stopping distance and those kind of things. I can tell you, for the trucking industry, they have teams when they are fatal wrecks, trucks are involved in wrecks, they have teams on standby that immediately go out there and take pictures and evidence and witness statements, and so you need to level the playing field as best you can. So, the bigger the wreck, unfortunately, the quicker you need an attorney.
All right, Matthew, always a pleasure to have you, Jim, on there.
Thank you.
Of course, always tune in on Saturday nights at 10:30 for Law Call on WLOX ABC. If you need a great attorney, if you've been in an accident, give them a call at Reeves Mestayer in Biloxi.